can Agile function effectively without frameworks? How can Agile be implemented or practiced without relying on a specific framework? How do we do that?
Yeah. It's a good. I mean, if you say can we do effectively without frameworks, it's a yes and no. And the yes is, look at the manifesto. It doesn't talk about the framework, and every framework has
Yes.
its own angle. And if you want to be agile, you need to cover all angles.
Do you see any, emerging trends or variations in agile practices nowadays? I mean, from your last 23 years of experience, as of today, 2023, do you see any upcoming emerging trends?
Yeah, so the upcoming trend is that what makes me very happy is that organizations and leadership teams really understand, okay, we need to do something, that waterfall is no longer working. Upcoming trends, okay, how can we adapt the finance rhythm? Upcoming trends, okay, we need to look beyond the borders of our organization into the ecosystem.
Wishing you all a very happy new year. Are you feeling like agile stuck in a framework rut? Endless meeting, slow progress, and a mountain of rules that never get cracked upon? We get it. Today's episode throws open the Agile toolbox and explores a stripped down approach, frameworkless Agile, ditch the dogma, put people first, and discover the true potential of Agile. Get ready to rethink roles, overcome challenges, and reimagine Agile one step at a time. Buckle up, grab your coffee, and join us on this episode with our legendary guest, Arie van Bennekum. Arie is a co-author of Agile Manifesto, keynote speaker, debutant author of his upcoming book, Agnostic Agile, and Pragmatist. He has started his journey with healthcare, later in the armed forces, and now into IT. This has led to his special position as co-author of the Agile Manifesto. In the course of his 30 years in Agile, Arie has become an expert in the field of business transformation towards Agile on the basis of strategic objectives. He focuses on delivering value, bringing efficiency, and creating support among stakeholders through role and chain clarity based on the business model and the work packages. So without further delay, let's welcome Arie.
Hello, Ari. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's very pleasure or maybe honor for us to have you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All my pleasure. All my pleasure. If I can help out the agile community, here I am.
Yes, definitely. And today we want to have a discussion with you or a conversation with you on the topic, the framework agnostic agile coaching. Uh, after for quite some time now, we are trying to maybe understand or dig deeper upon this area, wherein we're trying to understand how do we implement agile without following any particular framework, or trying to understand whether is it possible, or and if yes, then how do we do that? So we also know that you are also coming up with the similar topic through your book, I think probably in the next year or so. So we thought maybe let's start from you to have a conversation on the similar topic. So today, as we mentioned, we want to talk about the framework agnostic agile coaching. That's what we call it. So to begin with, obviously, since you are the co-creator of Agile Manifesto, so let's start from there, and we would want to understand from you, how do you reflect upon the Agile Manifesto today?
It's a simple question, and at the same time, it's not an easy answer. I have to take you back to, the mid 90s. In 1994, I made a very conscious choice to start working in a different way because I was bumping into waterfall problems that are embedded in the waterfall. You can't avoid them. It's just the way it is. And I was just trying to find my way around it. And I think, more or less in that same time span, whether it was the early 90s or the later 90s, the other authors of the manifesto had the same thing, right? You are used to work in projects or whatever you do, and you bump into the waterfall problem. So at the time, it was okay. How can we fix this? And every one of us. I mean, we were 17 people, and every one of us, we had our own focus on, okay, what do I want to improve compared to that waterfall? Some people were very much focusing on things like quality or efficiency. My big issue was
Mm-hmm.
the value delivery, because I came out of governmental projects where you spend public money, and I was very disappointed in the way it happened. Even projects got just stopped like this, and I thought, there has to be a way to get closer to what is needed. Why do you start a project, and how can you deliver a project to get to that value? So that was the thought in the mid 90s. And when we so you get over time. So in my time, from 1994 to February 2001, you do your commercial work, you do your projects, and you try to improve and you try to experiment. Very interesting time of my life, I have to say. So I always say in 1994, this is where the experimenting started, and it never stopped ever. Hey, and I think for the other guys, it was the same thing. And if I look back on the manifesto now, I think it's still very, very valid. The, the issue that I bumped into was the fact that for me, it all felt like common sense. So if I would do
Mm-hmm.
projects um, at the client side, I had to prepare for this new way of working. And after the preparation, you get into the deliveries, and you do it. But I also met people, CIOs and program managers that I worked for, and I said, it's so complicated the way you work. And I thought, there's nothing complicated here. It's like, basically it's about improving the communication. I put people at the table, literally, right? And that's where after a while I thought, oh, and this is maybe like, so now 20 years ago, that I thought, oh, implementing Agile, that's not the way. You don't implement, because there's a deeper change. You have to change the mindset. I found out, that Agile is a paradigm change. So I got more into, how can I do a transformation? And at the same time, if you want to create that corporate agility, that you need to understand multiple frameworks to serve the different problems like quality, efficiency, and value delivery. And I started to bring those together. That's what I did. And I think if you look where we are now, there's still a lot of work to do. And what I see is that a lot of people, take a quantum leap and okay, oh, we're agile now, and now we're going to the next one, and they are at that moment even far from agile. It's a longer journey, especially if you really want to be agile and do agnostic. You need to understand the deeper meanings of agile and the deeper changes of agile. And that's the paradigm change is a difficult one. If you define paradigm as a perception of life, people have to change their perception of how you do work. And the perception that we are educated in the old perception. We have the knowledge, we have the experience, we have the habits, and we have the reflexes if something goes wrong. And all of those have to change to make a solid agile organization or a team or whatever you do. So if I reflect back on the manifesto today, at that time it felt so logical for me. Now I understand why it is so difficult for other people sometimes to get a real agile implementation, or if you like, transformation.
Mhm. So yeah, so maybe there were a lot of points to pick up on, or maybe definitely we'll try to have or bring up those points into the conversation. One of the things that you definitely spoke about is the mindset, the shift, the way that perception shift is required. Uh, Having said that, what do you think about the current state about agile, and how do you think the way forward should be? I know, I mean, this can be a single podcast altogether into this conversation, but maybe if you can quickly would like to share your thoughts about it.
Um, if you look at the current state, because very often I get the question, oh, Arie, what would you like to change about the Agile Manifesto?
Yes.
And honestly, I always say, the one word that we should have never put in there is the word software. We should have put there the word product,
Wow.
solution, or service, maybe, right? But next to that one, I think the manifesto is still very solid. And the reason I say it is if you talk about the current state, um, that paradigm change that we talked about before is not easy. And people don't like difficult stuff. So people like to take the quantum leap. So people like to take the situation where they ask a consultancy firm or an agile coach or whatever, tell me how to work, tell me what to do, and without taking the responsibility, which includes the deeper change. And I think, with all the things that I see happening now, I think the way forward should be accepting that if you really want to get to a real agility, you should step away from the dogmas around frameworks. Accept that if you really want to get to agility, you need to understand and apply practices from multiple frameworks, depending on the need of the different teams, right? And that's where you get the agility. As long as you keep the connections between the teams, that's fine. But in the teams, you need to get that kind of improvement. And depending on the type of work, depending on the way the team is, the people in there, and the struggles they have or the successes they have, they might have different needs. And I think in that sense, there's still a lot to do on getting agile. Instead of taking the quantum leap after agile, get this properly done first. And this is where a lot of organizations still have a long way to go. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So since already spoke about being like, getting away from the dogma of any particular framework. So this question is, say, for all the beginners who want to kind of get into this agile space, and maybe they don't want to get into maybe any particular framework per se. So what I would like to understand is, can agile function effectively without frameworks? How can agile be implemented or practiced without relying on a specific framework? How do we do that?
Yeah, yeah. It's a good. I mean, if you say can we do effectively without frameworks, it's a yes and no. And the yes is, look at the manifesto. It doesn't talk about the framework, and every framework has
Yes.
its own angle. And if you want to be agile, you need to cover all angles, right? So if you answer, can you do without the framework? Yes, in the sense that you have to understand it's not one framework that you need. You need practices from. So, for example, if you look at me, I will never work without the pairing principle of extreme programming. I will never work without test-driven development. I will never work without visual management. I will never work without agile collaboration foundations. And they go all over different frameworks. So now is the no, because those practices like the foundations and the snowman and TDD and pairing, they are from frameworks. They are practices from frameworks. So there's the
Mhm.
no. You need to understand the different frameworks, understanding where their focus and their benefits are. And then depending on the team, you say, okay, for this team, I need from this framework a practice. And this team, I need from this framework. And there can be different frameworks, different angles. So it's a yes, you can do it. It's not one framework if you ask the question in that perspective, but it's a no, because you need to understand the frameworks and the practices that they have to be able to help the teams forward, whether you're a scrum master or an agile coach, to see, how can we improve our agility as we, compared to where we are today. Yeah. And that's for me, when it comes to implement. Yeah, implementation is then a difficult word, because I think you can implement a practice, you can implement a rule, but you cannot implement a mindset and a paradigm shift. And that's
Wow.
transformation. That's human psychology, right? So I was talking to somebody recently in Madrid, in Spain, and he said to me, Arie, I don't even use the word transformation anymore. I use the word adoption. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
word you use, fine for me. For me, the difference between an implementation is, okay, this is how it has to be done, sort of a rule, And a transformation is, okay, we learn you to accept and, if you like, adopt a new mindset, new habits, new reflexes, and bit by bit grow into, the new ways of working, not telling you what to do, but offering you what is available in a way that, if I have this problem, this is what I could do. And that's a transformation process. It's not up to words, but this is how I define it. Yeah.
Mhm. So maybe I'm just trying to draw a parallel to the way that I have experienced working with different teams within different organizations. Or maybe I would be open to say that I've most of my part of my experience, I would say I've worked extensively on Scrum. Uh, with what you shared, you definitely said that maybe there should be, picking up on certain practices from different frameworks, and
Yeah.
that is where I also believe Scrum has a as a framework, it defines certain structure, but there's definitely teams go beyond Scrum, picking up certain complementary practices which they believe is definitely going to help them in getting things done in a better way in terms of delivering things. Do you mean
Yeah.
to say that it's always a good practice to not restrict yourself to a particular framework, but to look beyond a particular framework? And with that, I'm trying to say that not to have that rigidity around saying that this is not part of the framework.
Yeah. That's what I would agree. Let me give you two examples, right? So what people don't like is change. So when new things come in, they try to bring it as close to what they know as they can. And one of the things that people do is they put the product owner in between the business and the team. Now, when we wrote the manifesto, we said, oh, face-to-face conversation is the best way to convey information, right?
Absolutely.
Um, what if you have a business team talking to a product owner, and then the product owner talking to the development team? So now we know that the development team is not talking face-to-face to the business anymore. So we
Correct.
forget about this. So I think that the next one that needs to be up is, okay, how can you make sure that the people who make it talk to the people who need it directly, not via, directly. That's one example. And another one is, still in the state where we are 23 years almost after writing the manifesto, we do things in a different way. And if you want to do things in a different way, you have to make sure that at least you have some sort of agreement on how are we going to work together. I call that the collaboration foundations. And I remember when we wrote the manifesto, the word foundations was already part of the way I worked. I would always spend time as a project manager, 1 or 2 sprints. I would spend time on setting up the collaborations, which was about the collaboration foundations, but also part of the business foundations is, okay, what is the prioritized requirements list, your product backlog? Product backlog they don't grow on trees. And I remember in 2011 when I was in Salt Lake City and we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of the manifesto, so many people came to me and said, Arie, we do Scrum, and when we have the backlog, we are so fine. But sometimes we have to wait 6 to 12 months before we get a backlog. Now, I think if you need to wait 6 to 12 months for a backlog, you shouldn't do the work at all, because obviously it has no priority,
Absolutely.
right? You can't wait that long. So don't do it. So what if you can speed up the process? And I have always been speed with quality. I think agility is about, speeding up the quality delivery and doing that in an agile way. I remember when we wrote the manifesto, some of the other guys said, "Oh, your your way of working is not that lightweight," because everybody was talking about, okay, so now we're going into delivery, we're going into sprints. What do we do? And I said, hold on, you have that piece before, and I do that work as well. And I think from that perspective, I think if you look, okay, what's going to change it? I think it's the fact that we need to align everybody involved. Now you can call it foundations, whatever you know word that you use for it. But at the same time, the deeper understanding that people really need to talk face to face, and face to face does not only mean no remote or written communication, but it means you get your information at the source. I mean, Vivek, if I talk to you and then you talk to Ramya and you said, this is what Arie said, instantly you will get distortion in the communication, because you have your interpretations and assumptions. So if Ramya wants to know, she can ask me, right? And you can be part
Exactly.
of that. But now she will have still her interpretations and assumptions, but she can check them on the spot in seconds. And that is improving the quality, especially the quality of the value delivery. So I think, in terms of, um, the roles around the frameworks, I don't care how you call people, but understanding that you should get your information at the source is essential. And that's what's going to be needed to get to true agility. Yeah.
Wow. So I was just getting to the roles part itself. I mean, when you mentioned about, say, product owner, you talked about maybe business people and teams also coming together. And if we say that, I mean, there won't be any framework, and I mean, in future, I mean, we can do even, or we can live without a framework, any particular framework, but then mixture of multiple practices from different frameworks, right? So what do you think, what would happen to the existing roles? This is very curious question because as Vivek mentioned, I mean, people are used to working in, say, Scrum, just an example, or maybe Safe, I mean, or any other framework, right? So every framework has got, I mean, set of rules and the roles. So for an example, when we talk about, say, Scrum, and maybe I'm using Scrum as an example because many people would relate to it. So, for an example, we have Scrum Master and we have developers and we have product owner. So, what do you think would happen to such roles when we say it would be just agility, or maybe it would be agile in general, mix of practices? And where will these roles fit in?
Yeah. So when let's take the Scrum role, Scrum Master and Product Owner as an example.
Mhm.
Part of the old thinking is I need a clear description of my role. So we go into an A4 and says the Scrum Master, da 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 da, da, and then I say, okay, now I am a Scrum Master, or even better, I am promoted to be a Scrum Master. And if I am a Scrum Master for 2, 3, or 4 years, it gets worse because now I'm promoted to be a senior Scrum Master. What it means is that I only have one role that I can fulfill. And being able to do, tasks of different roles in a team is essential. Because what you want with Agile is you want to cut out all the delay. So if I have a role and I'm the only one who can do this job and I get sick, or I go on holiday, or I am on maternity leave, or now whatever you make, does the team come to a standstill? No, somebody has to be able to step in. I want to give you an example about, I worked in a digital factory, and literally Scrum Master in a team was a role. So every sprint, the team could say, okay, in this sprint, this will be, and somebody would say, okay, I will be the Scrum Master in this sprint, and of course, some would be more experienced or even better in the role of Scrum Master, and others in the role of product owner or in the role of whatever, right? But still, you need to be able to step in if somebody else gets stuck for whatever reason. And I think that's the most important thing that people understand, and that's a transition we have to make. If you look at the product owner, the way I just described it, where you say, okay, the product owner is in between business and the development team, it's such nonsense because you keep via communication, including distortion, you keep that in place. So you don't want that. And the product owner role more and more has to become the role that brings people together and helps people from different backgrounds, like the business and the IT or whatever they are, together. And because they have their own business language, they need to understand each other. And this is where the product owner comes in. And that's the next transition that has to happen. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and also maybe just to understand is like Scrum has definitely defined those accountabilities or roles, but I think the way people have looked upon it or understood it from a point of view, there are certain rules, but then this role again becomes a gatekeeper or a bottleneck while having interactions with the business people and the developers. I mean, they imagine or they believe that the product owner is the only person who would go to the business and understand, certain context, and then come back to the developers and talk about it, right? So maybe that is where the understanding or the way to reflect upon the structure of the scrum is, I believe, that is how people have taken it in the wrong way.
Exactly. I mean, and it's coming back from the fact that people in change try to hold on to what they know because it feels safe. Nobody said that the product owner should be in between the business and development team. That's what people make out of it, right? And understanding to cut the communication line short, to have people together at the table being facilitated by a product owner. That's the thing to understand. But people are a long way from this, I can tell you. And that's just because of the old paradigms are so deeply rooted in education systems at universities. And then, I mean, I look at two people that are much younger than I am, but you get into an organization and there's this 50-year-old guy that has been in the company for 25 years. And if you have an idea, oh, let me talk to the business, he will tell you that's not the way we do it here. And they will force you back into the old habits. And this is why it takes so much time to get that done. So I always say, look at me, I'm 59. But I always say, guys over 50 with gray hair and a beard, they are the worst, when it comes to change and working agile. Yeah. The longer the beard, the worse it gets. Yeah.
And also one of the worst things that people will tell you, that happens only in the ideal world, right? That doesn't happen in our organizations or in our projects. That only happens in the ideal world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do agile now for almost 30 years, 29 and a half, a little bit more. You don't want to know how many times I heard, oh, that is a really good idea, but it doesn't work for us. Okay, so did you ever try it? No, but it doesn't work for us. You know, and the funny thing is, because I started doing master classes on this in 1995, and I heard that line from my very first masterclass. And all those companies that were in the masterclasses then are now doing agile. I mean, this is how long it takes for people to adopt change. Hey, that's 30 years down the line, almost 30 years down the line. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And, and to that, I think that is one of the challenges that we encounter nowadays. And again, while we are talking about, maybe having things around not having a framework in structure, do you think agile without any framework, uh, is it really possible? And how it can be addressed in terms of the challenges that it might, come across while for people?
Yeah, you can do it. As I said, you can do it without a framework, but you need to understand frameworks to know what practices to pick from which framework, because you have a specific need with your team. And today you might have a quality issue. And in a month, you might have a value issue. And then you need to look at different frameworks. So working agile means don't stick to one framework, because that's not going to bring you agility. But you need to understand the frameworks, to understand what helps you most given the situation that you are in. And people don't like change, so that's difficult. And people like the easy way. So yeah, but this agile coach told me, or this little book about this framework told me, yeah, but there is more. And then people are just not willing to learn, and especially understanding that if you do something for the first time, it will not be easy. You might make mistakes, right? And people don't like, don't want to take the risk maybe to make a mistake. And then we can say, yeah, but this was in the book, but this is what the agile coach said, right? And it doesn't work.
Yes.
Yes, it works, but maybe you chose the wrong practice from the wrong framework. What do you mean? And I meet people, and this is how narrow people can think. I need people that are agile coaches. They are certified in Scrum and Safe. They don't even know there are other frameworks.
Exactly.
And that's the scary part, because if you choose for a framework, now fine for me. But if you don't even know there are other frameworks, what the hell, right? No.
Yeah. Also, To add to that, I think the other problem is also people believe is for each of the problem, maybe they have only a set of solution in terms of the frameworks that they have around. And again, I would say maybe if the product or maybe the scale of the transformation is large enough, they might move to a scaling framework. And if it is a small, maybe they might move to maybe a Scrum or maybe to beyond a Nexus, right? And that is where I believe the problem starts in when we have a pre-decided notion saying that, yes, this is a problem, we'll go with this implementation of the framework and that will help us get this problem solved.
Yeah, and I think it's also given by, big consultancy firms. They come in, they spend a lot of time on, okay, what should be the operating model? Turns out to be 9 out of 10 the Spotify model, and then the solution 9 out of 10 means Scrum and Safe, and people are struggling there already more than enough. And then the company is disappointed because the agility is not coming, and that's simply because people don't understand there's more around than the other frameworks. Take it to your benefit. I don't judge Scrum or Safe in itself, but I judge the people who don't look any further than those two. Because, for example, the work of Ken Beck and Ward Cunningham on extreme programming has for me been vital all my life. For 20 years now, over 20 years now. The things from like DSDM, or from Crystal, or from test-driven development from James Grenning. Those are for me essential. And just take the effort, to understand what it can help your team to avoid delay for delivery. Because in the end, agile working means that every sprint you go to production, right? So
Yes.
what can you do to make that happen? And that means that you have to dive into the different frameworks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, and also to add to what you mentioned earlier, that people like to go or make it easy, right? That so and so book said that, or maybe so and so agile coach said that, and I mean I can relate to so many things. I mean, in just past few days, so many incidences I came across, and I mean I can relate to what you said. People just want to be safe in terms of they want some template so that they can fall back to saying that this is the template, and in this template these are the lines that say that, and
It's
we'll
what it
fall back
says.
to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. I even had a call earlier in the week where somebody said, "Oh, Arie, can we have a conversation about this and this? Because I need to understand what do I do with all my templates." And I thought, of course, yeah. And I'm not laughing at the person, I'm laughing at the situation, because it's very common that you see this.
exactly.
You know, the templates are people's security, and people don't like taking risks for some reason. Yeah. And I just want to say that if you take us back to 2001, where we wrote the manifesto, every one of us has been taking risks for years, experimenting at the client side with commercial projects that we did, doing things that nobody knew about, convincing people to work in this way together, at least for one delivery. So, improvement is not without the risk. But both though people don't think in terms of improvement, they think in terms, okay, how can I stay safe? And not safe as in the skilled
Absolutely.
as the framework, but safe as in
Yes,
how can I,
safety
make
net.
sure I'm totally secure. Yeah.
Yes, and also I mean recently, I mean, I would like to say or maybe share this. I mean, I was speaking or maybe training bunch of project managers, and while training them, there was this topic wherein you know what, people are not performing, and we have to release people from the projects and all those things. So, I mean, the conclusion of that was maybe, you know what, before you maybe think of releasing anyone from the project, give them some time and opportunity so that they can improve upon it, and then maybe you take a decision. So that was my maybe conclusion that I told. I mean, the question that I was asked was, what do you think? How much time should we give? So that's when I said that I cannot tell you that maybe you give 2 days or 3 days and then give an opportunity. You find out what that time is, right? Don't try to templatize anything. Agile and templatization is an oxymoron. So do not try to templatize anything. and figure out what that timeline is for you. What timeline is for you may not be true for some other teams. So maybe you say that maybe let's give this person an opportunity for say a sprints time, or maybe two sprints, right? So maybe some other project manager would say we don't have that leverage of giving so much time because we are moving we are on
Mm.
like moving on the wheel. So for us it could be just a week's time or whatever, right? So I said that would happen. I mean, don't try to templatize everything just because Ramya has told, or maybe Agile coach has said, so we would only wait for one sprint and try and then release the person, right? So people are so much ingrained. I mean, they are used to like take that command and control and do the templatization of everything that, as you rightly mentioned, yeah, it's mentioned over here, or maybe the coach has mentioned. So yes, let's do that.
Yeah. So when you talk about project teams and releasing people from the team, one of the things that I have seen, especially in the years before I started to change, is that there would be work and they would create a team around the work. That means that you bring together a group of people that don't know each other, let alone that they have a velocity together. They don't. And managers will make the estimate for them and they expect miracles. And of course, then somebody is not meeting expectations, and instantly we release them from the project and get somebody else in. Instantly we have another change in the team, and the change is going down in production again. And one of the big changes, and that's maybe a big thing. No, it's not maybe. It is a big thing on the management level. Is that you need to understand that if you want to build successful teams, has nothing to do with agile, but with agile as well, right? It's not just agile. Is that if you want to build a successful team, you have to make sure that you keep the team stable, so people can get used to each other, so people can know and how they can help each other, so they can create a stable velocity, trust, and a psychological safety, right? That's what you are. But as long as you keep changing over and over and over again, and that's where we are today, the only solution that old school managers see is, oh, let's release this person from his project and get somebody else in.
Exactly.
And it's not working, of course. And the client is disappointed. You have different conversations on every contact in the team, and you focus. And this is a big change when it comes to agile working. Keep your team stable. Yeah. And if you ask me, challenges people that may encounter during implementing agile, without a framework, when we talk about the deeper mindset, we can talk about us, being on teams and working in the delivery. But management teams have to understand, I need to treat my people in a different way. I need to perceive them in a different way. And one of the paradigms is that you don't change teams all the time. That's really what we need to understand.
Yeah. And now maybe would like to bring up this very important question. I think most of the people around are talking about is, especially is at this point of time. And do you think there's need to reimagine agile? I mean, and what are your thoughts if would feel like so? And I think
Yeah,
again, Jim Highsmith was also talking about it a few weeks back on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, would you like to talk about it as well?
Yeah, as you can imagine, Vivek, I know this because Jim contacted not just me, but also other authors of the Agile Manifesto guys. I made this post. I saw the post as
Correct.
well. Okay. And I said, what I basically said to him in one paragraph that I sent him, we still have to open up more of the conversation, but um, is it time to reimagine? On one hand, no. When it comes back to what we intended to say when we talked about the Agile in 2001 and the Agile Manifesto, there's still so much work to do. The other side of the story is we talk about business agility and corporate agility all the time. And that means that finally we understand that we have agile. If you really want to have an agile organization, it's not just IT, which is bollocks anyway. I never did it exclusively in IT. Always had all the other disciplines in the delivery and separate teams working in parallel and blah blah. I always had that working. But now, when it becomes, the agile mindset and the agile thought, has becoming further than ever after 23 years, you need to understand, okay, so I have my organization, whether it's a governmental one, not for profit, or any privately owned organization, doesn't really matter. It's like, okay, I have my delivery, but what about my finance? What about my budgeting? I can not do annual budgeting forecasts and trying to be an agile organization. So I need to work on that one. And then the next step is, of course, okay, I'm a company. I'm trying to work agile, but I have suppliers, I have vendors, I have a supply chain. How do I connect in an agile way with those? Right. And that's something that will be, if you talk about reimagining, that's where I mean, it's not, maybe reimagining is not even the word. It's just the next step. Okay, where do we go? Okay, if you get agility on the inside of the company, now make sure that your finance rhythm is different. Beyond Boxness is really good on beyond budgeting. It's very helpful. Maybe you've met him. And then, of course, when it comes to the the circle around your organization, when it comes to suppliers and vendors and contracts and your supply chain, people like Mirko Kleiner are talking, okay, how we can do this. And he talks about the physical supply chain. He talks about the car manufacturing industry, but it's not just, cars in general. If you have your organization and you want to be agile, you need to understand, if I am working agile, but my vendors and suppliers are not, and my contracts with them are not, I'm still, held hostage, right? So that's the kind of thing. If you talk about reimagining, defining the way forward, I think that's where we should go. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And again, you made a very beautiful point here. Is like being agile is maybe internally we might try, be successful doing it, but when we talk about external, I mean, that is where you spoke about the vendors, and when we're talking about exactly the entire supply chain management, I mean, maybe as a IT organization, we might be doing, as an individual kind of thing, but when we're talking about the entire supply chain, maybe the example that you shared about a manufacturing company, especially in that they have an entire set of supply chain, right from the raw suppliers to developing it and to pushing it to production, and then handing it over to the customers. So for the entire supply chain, that
Yeah.
is that is where we need to look upon in terms of agility.
And I agree. And, when we talk about supply chain, we always think about physical stuff. But what do you think about your supply chain in releasing new software products? It's not different, hey? Because you see very often, oh, we work agile, but once when it comes to releases, all of a sudden it's like, oh, everybody's panicking, right? So in general, that supply chain, which means basically we talk about the ecosystem of your organization. You need to
Yes.
do this together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and also when you spoke about, I mean, yes and no, and when you said no, right? What I assumed, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you said no because as of today, people are still struggling to get the actual agility right. I mean, maybe in terms of, if I just talk about manifesto on those 12 principles and maybe values, right? So people are still not got to the point where they understand how do we just make use of these values and principles and yet try to solve our problems. And now we are talking about maybe reimagining or maybe extending it to further, right? And now here, as per whatever, as you mentioned, I mean, if you were to change something, you would change software, right? So if we even talk about just software industry and implementing agile, we have still not gotten to that place wherein we say that, you know what, now we have done and dusted, and now we move on to some other space. So I'm assuming that you're saying from that point of view. So am I right in assuming that, or was there any other reason when you said no?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. My point is that um, on one hand, when it comes to agile, as when we wrote the manifesto, so many organizations, agile coaches, and all those agile professionals are far from that. So there's still a long way to go to improve, and every step that you take is a good one, but there's still a lot of steps to take. At the same time, after 23 years, we have a lot of new insights, and that's where you get to, okay, what about financing? What about things like your supply chain or your vendors or your ecosystem? Yeah. And that's where you can take in. So it's better. Try to be. One of the things that I miss is that people will say, yeah, but the book says, whether it's an agile playbook or it's a framework. And then I think, take now a retrospective and reflect on how does it really apply what I do to the values and the principles of the manifesto. And then you can see people get stuck. And that's where that's where a lot of benefits can be achieved still. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely true about that. And maybe since we are talking about the way forward or extending it beyond, do you see any, emerging trends or variations in agile practices nowadays? I mean, from your last 23 years of experience, as of today, 2023, do you see any upcoming emerging trends?
Yeah, so the upcoming trend is that it makes me very happy is that organizations and leadership teams really understand, okay, we need to do something, that waterfall is no longer working. Upcoming trends, okay, how can we adapt the finance rhythm? Upcoming trends, okay, we need to look beyond the borders of our organization into the ecosystem, right, as we call it. The other trend is still already for over a decade or more that especially people from leadership teams and on decision-making levels, most likely because a lot of them are guys over 50 with gray hair and a beard, they just look at certifications and books of frameworks. So I suggest everybody above 50 gets fired. We get people from below 35 in, and maybe that would be the next trend to make it really agile in the world.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
Just rocking the cradle. I mean, yeah.
So
I mean
maybe
this.
since you're
I mean this.
talking, yeah.
And not in terms of firing them, but they have executive teams ask me to do a transformation. And when I get into the transformation in their organization, the executive teams are the ones working against me the most.
Oh yes.
Oh,
I
yes. I
can't
mean, you're
agree
not the only
more.
one. We all know this, right? So I would really say that, I mean, the longer you work, the stronger your old paradigms get. And most managers are people that are in a company for a long time, have strong paradigms, and they are successful because they're in the leadership position. So they will say, okay, this is what it is. And by the way, what you want to do is a very good idea, but it doesn't work for us. And I think, yeah, the first time that I heard that one was 1995.
Oh God.
So
And we are still
yeah,
hearing that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is exactly same thing. As I was speaking about maybe working with project managers on training them, right? So this was exactly same thing that I said to them that you know what, this generation of people, I mean, when we talk about Gen Zs and all those people, right? They really don't care whether they do more than one jobs or whether they are like maybe working or whatever. What they care is they know they have skill set, they know they have talent, and they are like, if I don't get that freedom and if I don't get that respect, I'm okay to leave this organization and move on. I mean, I don't care whether I want to stay or not. That's exactly what I was saying, that encourage youngsters to come up with more
Yeah.
ideas. Don't I mean, the more we age, and these were the exact same words I told them, that the more we age and the more we experience, the more rigid we tend to get. So try to shed off those rigidity and try to accept or maybe welcome people with new ideas and
Yeah.
new generations.
I have an idea. I have an idea. Now, you guys are in India. I'm in the Netherlands. It's a little bit apart, right? But we could build a new zoo. And I think
Oh
we should call
wow.
it the Waterfall Zoo. Where you say, hey, this is the old school manager. Look at him, gray hair and a beard. And, he's holding on, look at him holding on to, and here is the waterfall teacher. And here is the waterfall. I think we could make a waterfall zoo. Yeah, that would be a nice one. Yeah. And of course, we make a joke about it, but if you're an agile coach, and you guys are, and I'm working on transformations as well, sometimes literally, I mean, I have been brought up by two parents and grandparents, by the way, who are very open, to change careers. And so I've been raised in that way. And I know not everybody is, so I can understand. And I also understand if you're 50 and you have two 25-year-olds at university that cost you a lot of money, and you have a mortgage, and you have a company car, and you have your status in the social community. And then a 30-year-old comes in and said, "Oh, we're going to do this differently. By the way, your position is no longer there. We're going to do something else." It's like, yeah, fuck you. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's logical, right? It's not that it's like stupidity. It's understandable. But at the same time, in the world where we live today, with the pace of change, the change of technology, not just technology. Look at what's going on with war, geopolitical stuff, and everything, and energy prices, and we need to be able to respond as an organization. And if you don't have that as an organization, you will disappear. And that's what you need to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe the last question for today's podcast. Obviously, I mean, as we spoke last time off the record, we would definitely want you to come back and maybe we can talk more about your book then. So, but then for today's conversation, what advice would you like to give to maybe young leaders or managers who are maybe trying their hands in doing agility or agile without
Yeah.
being I mean bounded by any sort of framework? So what advice would you like to give to them?
So this would take a podcast of another 3 hours, right? Because now we're going let me condense it into a minute. Old paradigms are strong, really strong. And I suffer from old paradigms as well. The example that I gave last Monday, I was talking at the Dutch Defense Organization, is that in this kitchen where I am sitting right now, I
Mm-hmm.
live here for 20 years. And when I came here, I put my bin behind one of the doors. It's a big kitchen, with a square and a cooking island. And then in 2000, I think 14 or 15. So after, 14 years, I put my trash bin behind another door. And then recently, my younger son came in and I was cooking and we were chatting, after work and blah, 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 blah. And automatically, when I was doing the work and I wanted to throw something away, I opened the old door. And this is how strong the human mind is, right? So we need to understand that paradigms and reflexes, and they are connected, are very strong. And the moment that
Muscle memory.
somebody says to you, "Oh, we could do this. Oh, we could do this," and you think, or maybe even you say, "Yes, but," that means that an old paradigm is stepping on your shoulder. So when you think yes, but, be honest to yourself. Okay, let me be open to this person and listen to understand, and give this person the time and space to make an experiment on that one. Because even if what he or she says didn't work in another team, maybe it can work in this team. And that's the only way to move forward. That's the only way to move forward. If
Wow,
you copy
amazing.
what other people have done, you will only be as good as they were. And if you experiment, that's the only way to move forward.
Absolutely. That's a very basic yet so powerful example that you shared about the trash bin, right? So, I mean, that's how we are. I mean, that's how our muscle memory has been, and it takes a lot of time. But then we have to start somewhere, right? So, I think if we don't take first step forward, we would always be at the same place. That's with that note. Thank you so
Now,
much, Ari.
before you say thank you, can I say one more thing?
Sure. Yes, please.
Uh,
Yes, yes.
I like to talk about this. I very often I use it on stage. So I think it was 2009. So that's already 14 years ago. I met Mr. Kofi Annan. And you guys are younger than I am, but he was at that moment in time retired Secretary General of the United Nations.
Wow.
And I had the privilege of sitting at the table with a couple, like four other people. We're sitting at the table, and for an hour and a half, serious conversation. And I asked him, in the context of, oh, we have a bad regime in a country, there's an economic ban. What do? If my children, my boys, I have two sons, I asked him at the time, if my two sons see an opportunity to help these people in the country, what do you think that they should do? Because there is this economic ban, they can't. And he said, Arie, tell your boys that change always starts with one person, and that's you. And I think we should take that responsibility, every one of us. Yeah. But can you
Yeah.
understand?
So yes, that was amazing example, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, the most powerful things are the simple ones, but we tend to ignore the simple things. We want everything to be packaged, and everything to be served in a uh, proper manner. But then simple things we tend to miss, and yes, change starts with us, with I mean, inside our homes, right? So that's a great point, Ari. And I think if we just talk about change, it would take another podcast, another 3 hours, as you rightly mentioned. But we
Yeah.
don't want to maybe continue for longer to just talk about this thing. We have so many things to talk to you, and especially about your book. And I'm sure it would be an interesting read and an insightful one for all of us. So, again, I mean, it would not be too long for us to maybe reach out to you to come back on this podcast. It would be, though it would sound like a next year, but it would be,
Yeah.
I think, in next few months, we would want you to come back and talk to us about your book. But till then, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing all the insights. It was great talking to you.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope that the people who listen to this podcast will really get something out of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arie.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.